Okay, everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining. Obviously today's fire, master or servant, your call. So today's webinar is brought to us by Leading Sheep, Making More from Sheep, and also the Young Beef and Sheep Producers Project, which is a federally funded project. So obviously today's presenter is Col Paton. Col is the Principal Extension Officer with DD based in Roma. A few of you might have come across Col in GLM, Grazing Land Management workshops that he runs across Queensland, so you may be familiar with him. So without any further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Col.
Thanks, Alex. G'day everyone, it's Col here. I know many of you, but there's some I don't know. And this is my first go at a webinar, so I hope the technology works okay for me. I'm used to standing up in front of people and engaging people eye to eye. So I'll do my best, but I hope this has some interaction. I'd like to get you people involved as well. I guess to start with, fire is going to be a topical issue this year. Obviously we have big fuel loads, so Alex has asked me to put together a bit of a presentation. I've got to firstly acknowledge MLA Edge Network, because I've used as for a starting point a lot of the slides from the Edge Network Grazing Land Management workshop, which we have versions of for right across Northern Australia. So getting on with it, as you saw in the advertisement, there's a range of questions I put up there. Some of the issues that are going to be addressed include fire as part of the ecosystem, the roles that fire can play in managing grazing lands, what fire can do to organic matter, how we can use fire without damaging grazing lands, and planning so that we can control the fires and that they don't create problems for us. Now, how about that for a photo? Taken end of last year, pretty common sight across this part of the region and into the mulga, given the good seasons that we've had so far this year. So everyone will have a different view on that, but firstly, what a lot of cattle feed, and isn't it great to see that after so many years of dry conditions? I'll just explain it as we go. The photo is a poplar box and sandalwood woodland with some regrowth in it. There's a lot of grass there, and people have different views of that grass. But firstly, for graziers, it's about the amount of feed they have for cattle, and we haven't seen that too often in the last 10 or 12 years. But it can be a threat or it can be an opportunity to different people, and different people have different perspectives. So some people, this fellow has a different perspective on how to fight fires, doesn't he? He's a bit of an optimist. All right. So two different people, seeing all that fuel presents different opportunities, or it may be a threat, and they have different views. So the next slide, there's a range of quotes that give a range of views of what people see when it comes to fire. And I've been involved in fire research and extension for over 30 years now with DPI and right across the state. And here's a range of comments that I've heard. Some say fire's no good for the country. Wildfires have gone through the paddocks and it's taken 5 or 6 years for those paddocks to recover. Others say that it's done a good job on their wattles. Some have said that fire scalds the ground and nothing grows after those fires. This is a comment made by a grazier in the Burnett who had speargrass country. Listen to the sound of that fire as we were watching the fire. He just flicked a match into the grass, like the sound of money being made in the mint. So to him, it was part of his production system. And this one as well. You only have to burn 1 square metre to pay for the cost of the match, and any more meant that the enterprise was going to be profitable. So different people have different views on fire. If you don't mind, can you give me a couple of experiences? Would you share with me some of the experiences some of you have had with fire in the past? Anyone want to give me some experiences?
Yeah, Col Dave, gardener here. I'm down south a bit in New South Wales, so but I've seen it in lucerne paddocks, and it's the best thing for a lucerne paddock you could ever get. I've used it to clean them up. So,
is that right?
You get up that way, but can be very beneficial to clean rubbish out of lucerne paddocks, and the lucerne just bounces back like nothing else. It loves the potash.
Well, I tell you, that's a first for me, Dave. That's pretty good stuff. I'll definitely remember that one. Any others?
Going back on Col, I do notice there's not very many good days to light a fire to get the result you want.
And does that mean the temperatures are not right for a lot of the time?
Well, yeah, you risk wind direction, temperatures, amount of staff, all builds up.
Yep. Okay, so what about other people?
Not many opportunities to have a fire.
There aren't there?
No.
So doesn't that make this year pretty special?
Mm.
Okay.
Regrowth after a fire.
Yep. Regrowth after a fire. Often an issue, isn't it? Righto. We might try and address some of those as we go through, eh? I'll go back to the webinar now. So at the end of this session, we'll give you a bit of an idea about a range of things, but including what role fire plays in pastures for promoting green pick, for controlling species composition, and in woodlands for keeping that balance between trees and grass. And also, I'll just touch on biodiversity, but not for too long. It does have a big role for biodiversity, but I can't afford to spend too much time on it in this session. Historically, fire has always been a part of the Australian landscape, and you could basically divide it into three periods of fire in Australia. Pre-human settlement, before Aborigines arrived in Australia, and those fires would have been infrequent, most likely pretty hot, ignited by lightning and volcanic ash. So they probably would have been fairly destructive fires. When Aborigines arrived here, so the literature tells me about 46,000 years ago, they started fire stick farming, and fires became more regular, a little bit more controlled, and mostly cooler, although there would have been still some quite hot fires. The point about their management is that they used fire frequently and broke up the landscape to a great extent by burning in different times of the year. They burnt any time of the year, and that controlled how far fires went to some extent. Then Europeans arrived, and fire regimes changed. So in a lot of areas there's a lot less fire, and in other areas there was overuse of fire, more frequent fires. In those areas where there were less fire, timber regrowth has probably become a bit of an issue. We introduced grazing stock, so we changed fuel loads. So fire regimes have basically gone through those three periods, and they all have different effects on the outcome. But really, fire has always been a part of the Australian landscape. It's always been a part of their ecology. So eucalypt woodlands and open grasslands like the Mitchell grass and the bluegrass grasslands have evolved with fire as part of their ecology. So it's a natural part of the system. So when we view fire personally, I guess there are threats and there are opportunities. Now some of the threats obviously are wildfire. To graziers, wildfire destroys the feed for stock and it damages infrastructure. So when that happens, obviously there's economic damage as well. So every threat we can view as an opportunity to try and avoid that threat, and we can do that by building firebreaks early in the season. Now we've had some rains, probably a pretty ideal time to do that. Now this year we've got so much more fuel than we've had in past years that a single blade width is probably not going to do the job. Wildfires are going to jump that pretty quickly, and we might need to go to 2 blade marks and possibly burn between those. And burning in the winter when it's a lot cooler, starting in the evening so it goes out of the night time when there's less of a threat of that fire getting away, is the best way to do that. There are some unfavourable results with burning, and we just heard a couple a moment ago. Here's some examples. Burning small areas of large paddocks encourages stock to graze those areas, and they pick those areas because they chase the green pick as it comes through later on. And that can cause damage by overgrazing in those smaller areas of the paddock. Burning at the wrong time of the year can harm some of our perennial grasses. So particularly when they're seeding, they're going to seed, or they're still late in their growing season, that can actually destroy some of those plants. And when you've got a lot of fallen timber, for example in the mulga country, if you've pulled the mulga 2, 3 or 4 times and there can be large amounts of timber on the ground, they can be very hot fires that actually scald the ground. So again, those threats, if we view them as opportunities for overcoming the threats, then what we can do is burn whole paddocks or large portions of paddocks so we don't concentrate stock in the one area. Preferably, we should be aiming to take stock out after fires and allow the pasture to recover before we put them back in. We can burn. The best time is in the late winter, the spring or the early summer, and particularly after rainfall is the best time to burn. We'll cover that a little bit more later on. And when you're pulling country, avoid building up large quantities of timber before burning. That timber can actually give you a good ground cover for allowing the pastures to come away, and then burning a little later on after pulling can give you an effective fire. So let's have a look at the opportunities now. These are the main points we'll cover. For freshening up old rank pasture, for evening up grazing, for improving pasture composition and controlling those woody weeds. Now, I've been involved in measuring pastures, how much grows for many years now in the job, and in some areas we've locked out little areas, call them exclosures, by putting fencing around excluding stock. And I've seen some of those areas that have been where stock have been excluded and they haven't been burnt for 15 years or more, that have become moribund, and actually where they started in pasture in very good condition or A condition, they degraded in that time and became more like C or D condition. They were overrun with things like wiregrass, even things like weeds like creeping lantana, and there was a lot of regrowth in there. There's certainly places that stock wouldn't want to be grazing. So all these things happen. The pastures can become, the good pastures, moribund and die. They're smothered by leaf and those pastures falling back on themselves. New seedlings don't appear, and just go back to the last one, they become unattractive to grazing. So burning can play a role there by removing that old material and making it more attractive to cattle. Stimulates new growth. So by burning we actually free up some of that nitrogen and make it available for the grasses that are growing. So the grasses that do grow are higher quality. And also removing that litter, or some of that litter, and the above ground material, in the late winter, early spring, the ground can warm up quicker than it normally would, so pastures start growing a little earlier in the season. It increases the proportion of and availability of green leaf for stock, increases the protein content of new leaves, so that's how it can increase stock weight gains. And it can help to even up grazing across the paddock. So one of the other roles that fire has is in managing pasture composition, and I've been involved in some of that work in different regions of the state, particularly in the Burnett. But here's some results from the mulga area, and there's been a lot of work done in the mulga areas around Charleville, and what they found was that after burning you get a flush of annuals coming through. They like that extra nitrogen that's available there, but once you got sufficient grass growing rain, the perennials come through and they rapidly grow if there's adequate soil moisture there. Generally, the results have shown that there's good repasture generation once there's moisture there and it's not affected by fire. Even burning during extended dry conditions usually doesn't damage the pasture. It's able to come back. If it starts in good condition, it's able to come back once you get rainfall. And because most of our eucalypt woodland, most of our grasses growing in the eucalypt woodlands and the grasslands have evolved with fire, their survival rates are pretty high. An exception is woolly butt that is set back, but it's not set back by too much. So in general, fire encourages desirable plant species, our desirable pasture species. It can help to control things like wiregrass, which is less palatable than our 3P, our pasture species, which are the perennial, palatable and productive grass species. It encourages 3Ps like our mulga Mitchell, mulga oats, and many others like kangaroo grass, for instance, which is common, and you would have seen a lot of it around this year. So it definitely has a role in controlling pasture composition. What role does it play in keeping that tree grass balance? Let's have a look. This fella's in a bit of trouble, isn't he? Generally, in our woodlands, the more trees we have, the less grass that grows, and you see that all the time. There are occasions when just a few trees, when we have low tree basal areas of 1 to 2 square metres per hectare, say in the mulga, you can get an increase in pasture growth. But mostly in the eucalypt woodlands, any trees means less pasture grows. So there's a competition there and there's a trade-off. Now, this again shows you a photo of the mulga woodlands. This is at Croxdale Research Station, where this paddock was pulled in 1991 and burned soon after. This photo was taken in 1995, mulga in the background, and most of you would know that mulga is very susceptible to fire, and so it gave good control of the mulga in this situation. Another one of the bushes we have that creates problems and competes with pastures is green turkey bush. And again at Croxdale, the work there showed that burning significantly reduced the cover of green turkey bush. It did come back, it did regrow from seed after about 18 months, but even after 18 to 20 months and 2 years, there was still a 78 to 90% reduction in plant numbers. But by the time I think about 5 years had passed, they were back to the same numbers but not the same canopy cover. So fire has a role in containing green turkey bush, and this year is probably one of the best opportunities to use fire. Now here's an example where I guess all of you would know that poplar box and sandalwood country is particularly aggressive when it comes to regrowth and pretty hard to control. It usually needs another stick raking or even blade ploughing to get rid of it. Now, this is an example down at Bowen on a property called Marillion, owned by Alan and Liz Browning, and they pulled their country and sowed buffle straight afterwards, and they spelled their country from anywhere from 12 months to 2 or 3 years to allow that buffle to get away. And once it did, they accumulated growth of the pasture and got a fire in there. Obviously there was going to be timber in there, and this is the result. They've got unbelievable results with fire at reducing the regrowth that's come in. I'm sure you would have all seen it over this season, but it just illustrates what can be done with fire, even in poplar box and sandalwood country. And I guess what happened in Alan's case is he accumulated enough pasture to get a good fire in, and he tends to burn in the hotter part of the year around November and December. So again, he used fire in pine country where the fire wasn't as hot, it wasn't as effective, and there's another photo that I have coming up that shows the hotter fire gave much better control of the pine. It's a photo of a pine thicket, and it was taken up near west of Injune, northwest of Injune, and a lot of people would know that sort of country that runs in a strip from, say, northwest of Injune right down through the Maranoa River, and right down through Dunkeld, Mitchell and Dunkeld, and those areas. And the pine regrowth in those areas has formed thickets, and I've set up on this particular property some monitoring survey pegs and looked at the composition of the pastures. And in these thickets, it's a biological desert. There's not much there at all. One of the managers on a property that was recently bought up there, this new manager was familiar with fire, and he was able to get some good hot fires in there. And the pictures show that the before, it had the before picture had probably 20 or 30 stems in a 10 square metre per hectare, 10 square metre area of pine, and then the subsequent photo after the fire shows that there were none of those trees left and plenty of grass coming back. So one of the risks with burning is that we can lose ground cover, and erosion can be a problem. And people ask what happens to those nutrients. A lot of them go up in the atmosphere, don't they? Now, it is true. If we have hot fires at the wrong time of the year, we can have scalding, and that leads to obviously loss of ground cover, runoff erosion, increased soil temperatures, and all those things that are listed there, including localised overgrazing. But if those fires are at the right time, we can be left with lots of ground cover, particularly if we can burn after a little bit of rain. And I'll show you some photos in a minute where there's been lots of ground cover left after burning a day or two after rain. But that bottom table shows you the results from an experiment that was done in central Queensland, and it's quite unusual. There were two paddocks side by side. One of these paddocks, the top line there, was in poor condition, and there had been some rain. That paddock was unburnt. The other paddock next to it was burnt in October, and then a month later both these paddocks had regrown to the extent that the paddock in poor condition had 50% ground cover. The paddock that had been burnt but was in good condition had 40% ground cover, so less than the unburnt paddock. Now, there was about 45 or 50 mils of rain that occurred a month after that fire, and the runoff on the paddock that was in poor condition was 18% of total rainfall, whereas the runoff of the paddock that was in good condition was only 3% of total rainfall. So there was 6 times the amount of runoff from the paddock that was unburnt and in poor condition. So what that is telling me is that the paddock the most important thing is not the fire, it's the condition of the country prior to the fire. That the fire had little effect. It was actually, because that paddock was in poor condition, we were getting a lot of runoff, and it wasn't an effect of the fire. So, What about hot fires, you might ask? Do they destroy organic matter? Well, yes, they can. But if fires are at the cooler time of the year, in spring, and particularly if those fires are after some rainfall, and we can control them and make sure that they're a little bit cooler, they can retain ground cover, and I'll show you a photo in a second. From work that was done at Brian Pasture's research station in the Burnett, where a fellow there by the name of Shane Campbell measured grass temperature, or temperatures in grass fires, he found that above ground, a centimetre, and even up to, in the canopy height, up to half a metre above ground level, those temperatures got to 250 to 450 degrees Celsius, but that was only there for a short period of time, a few seconds to a minute or so. 1 centimetre below the ground, the temperature of the soil was 30 to 60 degrees. So that's actually not going to destroy organic matter, and it's not going to destroy the seeds that are in the soil. In that case, the seed of black speargrass required temperatures of greater than 120 degrees C for more than 10 minutes to kill the seed. So most of our natives are actually going to survive those fires if they're buried in the ground. And here's that example of, this is a paddock that I saw was burnt a day or two after 45 mils of rain. And you could walk across that paddock and see that it retained all the litter on the ground. The top of the litter might have been scorched and blackened, but there was 100% ground cover in that paddock. So there was going to be no issue with erosion there with subsequent rainfall. So timing is important. So where do the nutrients go? Some nutrients are transported away. So 50% of the phosphorus is transferred away, 80% of the potassium. So that's as soot and ash, and it can come down in other spots, maybe on your place, maybe on your neighbour's. Some of the phosphorus, potassium and the calcium go back into the soil, but the carbon, sulphur and nitrogen, 90% of them go up in the atmosphere. Now, of course, with the carbon, once we get regrowth of that pasture, it's actually doing that through the process of photosynthesis, capturing the nitrogen, the carbon from the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, and putting it back into the plant. But nitrogen going up in the atmosphere is then lost to particularly our grasses. They can't take nitrogen from the atmosphere, whereas our legumes can. But when we burn, say at the right, what I consider the right time of the year, late winter, spring or early summer, while plants are still dormant, say we burn about 2,000 kilograms per hectare of pasture and the rest of it has been grazed. In that situation, most of the nitrogen content of that pasture would be way less than 0.5%. So 2,000 kilograms, we're talking about 10 kilograms per hectare or less of nitrogen. A lot of our soils would have in excess of 2,500 to 3,000 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen in total. So it's not much of that total nitrogen going up into the atmosphere. Some of our better soils, our alluvial soils, the Coolabah soils, would have 5 to 6 tonnes of nitrogen, 5 to 6,000 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen in the top half metre of the soil. So we're actually not losing a lot of that. In fact, storms are pretty good at putting nitrogen back into the soil, and we can recoup 5 to 9 or 10 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare through storms. So burning actually doesn't, through that act, we don't lose a lot of nitrogen from the system. Now fire has a role for biodiversity. Obviously there are some of our creatures and that are sensitive to fire, and we need to plan for them. But there are a lot of them who live in unburnt areas and actually forage in the burnt areas. The smaller marsupials live in tall grass areas and graze and dig in the shorter grass areas in high quality pastures. Our kangaroos tend to go and live in the scrubs and then graze on the short grass. areas. And of course, our grasses are part of biodiversity as well. So in our eucalypt woodlands, fire encourages a whole range of our different grasses, so they add to the biodiversity as well. So having some country that is burnt last year, some country that was burnt 2 or 3 years ago, some country that was burnt 5 years ago or maybe even 10 years ago is good for biodiversity. Having a range of different ages of pasture and woodland is good for biodiversity. Now, I've necessarily made this seminar pretty short, and it looks like I'm getting through it more quickly than I expected to, but I'm actually summing up here, so what I'm going to do is leave plenty of time for questions, and that might be a good way to finish. But in summing up, I always recommend that you shouldn't burn just for the sake of burning, that you should have a goal in mind when burning, and you should plan for that goal. So what is your goal? Is it to manipulate pasture composition or reduce the woody weeds that are there? And those two goals may require different amounts of pasture and different timing. Generally, aim for late winter or spring fires or early summer fires, preferably after some rain. And the frequency, the timing, and the intensity of those fires will depend on the goals. And of course, use firebreaks to exclude fire from those sensitive land types. There are some land types that haven't evolved with fires. They include our brigalow scrubs, our bottle tree scrubs, rainforest areas, and those types of land types. Try and keep fire out of them because fires there are damaging, so exclude them from fire. Some general recommendations here. Burn when the opportunity arises, and this year is a golden opportunity. It's one of those opportunities that occurs probably every 25 to 30 years. Some people might remember the 70s and the 50s. They were times when there were a lot of fires, and it's a great opportunity this year to have a planned fire. So plan for the fires. Cover yourself. Make sure you get a permit from your local fire warden for burning. In general, in this area, the mulga lands and the Marino Ballon, we probably need a tonne of dry matter per hectare of pasture to get an effective fire, and at least about 60% ground cover to achieve that. Paddocks should be burned when the pastures are dormant, not when they're freshly regrowing. Sometimes you might need to do that, but they will take longer to recover. One of the issues is that you hear people say, well, I burnt once, and that paddock became a real issue with regrowth. Now, many of our wattles have hard seeds, and when you put a fire through it, it can often crack that hard seed and allow the seed to germinate and seedlings to come away. So you've got a rash of seedlings growing. So what needs to be done there is to plan for follow-up burns, because particularly with wattles, and mulga is one of those, generally they don't set seed in the first 3 years of their life. So if you can get a follow-up fire within 3 years, you prevent them from setting seed, and you can control you've reduced the amount of seed bank there, and you can control the numbers of those plants coming through. And this year I have been out around the ridges, and in all that tall grass I've found plenty of regrowth, some seedlings that you wouldn't see unless you had to walk through the pasture. So it's worth using fire now to try and control some of those, and plan to have follow-up burns if you can to control the regrowth. In general, allow the burnt area to regenerate so that the pasture has set seed again before you put stock back in there. Or reduce the numbers in the paddock and burn a half of the paddock if you can't afford to take all your cattle out. And ensure that the grazing strategy that is consistent with the the fire goal that you have in mind. So you may need to take stock off a paddock a bit earlier so that you retain enough fuel to get a burn in when spring comes around or the time comes to burn. So I guess the essence of this talk is that good planning helps to make fire your servant and helps to reduce the risk of fire becoming your master. So Alex, I'll leave it there, and I actually got through it a lot quicker than I expected, but we've got time for questions.
All right, Cole. I've got one question here from Les Landsberg, just asking, how does buffel grass cope with fire?
Yeah, good question, Les, and g'day, Les, how you going? Buffel grass copes quite well with fire. I, in general, wouldn't recommend that you burn buffel grass or brigalow or gidgee country too often. It'd be to control regrowth. But those pictures that you couldn't see, unfortunately, were of buffel grass in poplar box and sandalwood country that had been burned on a regular basis, and it was a picture of health. Buffel doesn't mind fire. I wouldn't burn it too frequently. I'd be burning it to control regrowth only. Natalie, you got a question?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to know if there was a lot of people backburn just to prevent like the pasture coming in combination with the fire. When's the best time to do that?
So backburning can often be a safer way of burning. So backburning is when you burn into the wind. Backburns are good for burning firebreaks. They reduce the chance of that fire getting away. But they can be much hotter fires because it takes a lot longer than a head fire for that fire to pass through. So backburns can actually be a little bit more destructive, but when you've got a case of severe regrowth and that regrowth is quite tall, backburn allows the fire to pass across the trunk, and it can actually burn the trunk more effectively, and that stops the flow of sap up and down the trunk by burning the bark and reduces your regrowth issue. It may take your pastures longer to recover from that fire, but if regrowth is a big issue, then it might be worth it. Thanks, Natalie.
Okay. Thank you.
Cole, I'm just concerned about the legalities of it all. Like if you can get your permit from your local fire warden, veg management has still got all these rules and regulations, and just as an example where you suggested there a fire break 50 metres wide, they're saying 10 to 20 metres with an absolute maximum width of 20 metres for a fire break.
Okay, so
and
that'll be up to...
If you're going to burn areas to control regrowth, they start to say, well, that's de facto clearing. They don't want you to do that.
Okay, now I don't want to tread on dangerous ground here, but what you're doing is you're applying to your local fire warden for a hazard reduction permit.
Right.
Okay, and that covers you. That's all that needs to be said. With your fire break widths, if 20 metres is going to do the job for you, that's fine. I just put that in there as a suggestion at this stage because I know when we get later in the year some hotter days, some westerlies, one blade width isn't going to do the job.
No.
So with a fire permit, you're asking for a hazard reduction permit, and that'll be firstly for your fire break. Later in the year, it's going to be to reduce that amount of fuel that you have in your paddock at an appropriate time of the year, and that will cover you.
Okay. Even if the aim is to reduce your woody weeds?
You can actually apply for a permit to burn to reduce the density of your woody weeds.
Oh.
All right? But that has to go through the process of making an application, and you need to show photos of how the woodland density has increased over time and that you're seeking a permit to do that. But if you are applying to your local fire warden for a permit for hazard reduction, then that's all you need.
Good on you. Thanks, Cole.
Okay, Liz.
Just in relation to, I guess, where I was coming from with the timing and not very many suitable days. So, for example, trying not to burn when grasses are likely to be seeding, as against when the sap's up, when you're trying to kill or set back woody regrowth, especially in wattle.
So, Jeff, is it that compromise between having a hot enough fire to kill your regrowth and not damage your pastures?
That's correct.
Yeah. I've certainly seen fires that have occurred in November and December in our poplar box woodlands that have set the pasture back for a longer period of time. But the pasture does recover over time, and that's what the research demonstrated out at Charleville. So I guess again it's about planning. If the regrowth has got to a stage where a cool fire is not going to do it, and usually that's once it gets above 1.5 to 2 metres in height, then a hotter fire is required, and you're going to need to keep stock out for a longer period of time. That might be a whole growing season, or it could be even 2 growing seasons, and some grazing in the winter intervening. So you need to take that into the planning. If you find that the pasture recovers really quickly, then that's a bonus to you. Does that answer the question, Jeff?
Yeah, I guess what I was wanting to ask too is, from your experience, how effective is it to burn woody regrowth, especially wattles, when the sap's up, or how do you actually know when it's up, apart from, it's growing pretty well?
What's up?
I guess I'm from the North Queensland, where we're in the dry tropics, so our rainfall's probably going to be a little different to yours, down where you're talking. But from your experience, how much more effective is it to burn when the sap is up?
Oh, when the sap is up? Yeah.
Particularly for trying to set back regrowth, woody regrowth.
Yeah, I'm with you. Obviously it is going to be more effective, but it depends on the plant. Some of our wattles, you can actually slash them when they're just after they flowered, and that's in winter time, and they're not going to be running a lot of sap at that time, and it will control them. So it depends on the timber that's involved, but obviously the more sap that's flowing, the more likelihood you have of actually killing those plants. But again, it's a trade-off with your pasture.
Okay, we've got 2 of our members with questions. I'll put you on to Paul Flippo first.
Thanks, Fran.
Cole, I'm down south of Bolton. I've got a lot of sandalwood thickets. I was just wondering how your manager up at Injune managed to get fires started in his pine thicket.
Yeah, on a very hot day. That country, this particular property was just wall-to-wall pine, and he had to wait until November when it was pretty hot to get a reasonable fire to go through that country. So he depended a lot on the litter on the ground and any fuel, any grass, remaining grass in those pine thickets. So it is a bit of an issue in the box sandalwood country because it tends to be a bit hard. You don't get much fuel in that country. But the trick that Alan and Liz Browning used was to, if the box and the sandalwood got away, to chain it, allow the pasture to come back in, and then try and get a fire in. He was even burning as late as January, if he had to, in those situations, to get control of that timber.
Yeah, right, thanks. Yeah, pretty much what I thought, and I did clear a bit. My bucket came up quicker than my grass, so I'm sort of a bit behind the mark there. I'll just have to take my chances on it. Thank you.
Okay.
And Dan will want to have a question too.
Yeah, g'day, Cole.
How you going?
Good. Cole, burning spinifex country. There's a couple of us here that are interested in the pros and cons of that. Do the same principles apply?
Generally, yeah. Spinifex in some situations is an annual, and it comes back from seed. It handles fires quite well. Sometimes it might take a couple of years for it to come back sufficiently because the fire can actually kill the spinifex. But on the other hand, spinifex country that's not burned does get moribund, and it starts to die out. You see that ringing effect. So yeah, I'd be using fire. Your particular species of spinifex, I'd be burning a paddock this year. Just keep an eye on it to see how it reacts, and then plan accordingly for burns around the property and other parts of the in later years, I should say. But definitely, spinifex is used to fire as part of its ecology. There's no doubt about that.
Right, and yeah, same thing, wait till you've got a bit of moisture below the ground?
I think that's preferable. So those that are going to perenniate will come back from the base again. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Cole, there's a question here on the chat box from Dan Carney. Given the wetter than usual year, is it possible to do a burn now and allow time for the pasture to respond? We've got a few paddocks that are poor quality now, as the stock haven't used them, trying to get some winter feed.
Okay, it'll depend on what sort of grasses you've got in there. This is probably not the best time to burn. I'd certainly be waiting to, if they're good productive grasses in there, I wouldn't be burning it now. You can burn some areas up on the ridges perhaps to try and attract the stock to those areas later in the year. Providing those set seed, providing you can get a cool fire in, and those plants are already dormant once before you put the fire in, then it probably won't damage them too much. There are certainly a lot of situations where I see people burning in the autumn time when there's moisture in the soil. The pastures have become dormant; they're not growing as much, and it hasn't worried them too much. Just be a little bit careful about burning too much country at this time of year. Burning after rain, when overcast conditions allow pasture regreening, therefore opportunity is gone. Okay, we have a massive fuel load, so we're burning just before a weather event work. It can, if you can predict the weather, that's fine. That's probably the best time to burn. The advantage of burning after a little bit of rain is that the litter on top of the ground remains wet, and it doesn't get burnt. The issue with waiting too long after rain is that the stems start to green up, you get some regrowth of pasture, and like last year, we got rainfall from about July right through, and we had plenty of fuel to burn, but it was too green. People wanted to burn, they couldn't. So that becomes a bit of an issue, and sometimes you can't get a fire in that season, and you've got to wait to the next season. Burning after rain is the best way if you're game enough to try before rain, and you've got some confidence in a front coming through, then definitely go for it. Make sure you prioritise your paddocks. Burn one paddock before one rainfall event or after a rainfall event, and then as you get more rain, progress to the next ones. Don't burn the whole property or majority of your property in one go. Otherwise you could end up running into a dry remainder of the season, then running out of feed.
Oh yeah, g'day Cole. Yeah, Cole,
Okay, Bill?
you were talking about the negativity of back burning, but like where there's large amounts of fuel, as in wiregrass, I thought you'd nearly have to back burn and then go out and burn with the wind.
Oh, you mean to give yourself a fire break so it doesn't jump the track? Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
yeah, absolutely. I just thought it'd literally get away.
No, you do. You do, absolutely. And if you've got a paddock that you want to burn, then you have to start on the downwind side and backburn some of it. But the majority of that paddock is going to be burnt with a head fire. Would be the situation. Now, with wiregrass, the backburn is going to do more damage, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it's going to encourage others to come in. It'll knock that wiregrass around more and allow others to come in.
Yeah.
Does that cover your question?
Yeah, most of my other questions have been answered. Thank you, Col. It's been very interesting. Thank you.
Good on you, Bill.
Righto. For those who've asked the questions and still got a hand up next to them, have you guys have any more questions, Fran or Phil?
We're right, thank you.
Les, did you have another question?
Cassia bushes, Col, in pooled mulga country, like your broom bush, butterbush type things. What results do you get on them with fire?
Most of them are susceptible to fire, but I'd have to do a bit of literature research for you to get down to specifics. So I'd be happy to do that, Les, and I'll get back to you on it, eh?
If you could, because we did burn a small area as a trial once in pretty thick cassia area, and they all reshot very quickly and just seemed to be just as thick, and I just wondered what it took.
Oh, I reckon that'd be from the seed.
Righto.
It's got a lot of hard seed. It's a legume, and it'll have hard seed sitting there in the soil, just waiting to come away. So,
it's very prolific in a lot of our pooled mulga country this year.
See, that's, Les, where I reckon repeated fires is the answer. I know it's pretty hard to get repeated fires in your mulga country, but if you're lucky enough to string a couple of good seasons together, then that's the way to go.
Righto. Okay, thanks,
I'll do some, no worries, Les. I'll do some research for you, and I'll get back to you.
Good on you, thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, Chris Leeds here. I'm ending the session a bit late, I'm sorry, but when you burn country and you've got this timber on the ground, and wherever that is, you get this prolonged bare patch there. Is that because it's damaged, or is it sterilised, or does that country there with the ashes, is that fertilised by it in any way long term, or what?
A couple of things happen in those windrows that you've got. First of all, the temperatures of those fires and the time that they're extreme temperatures, a lot of coals, and they stay for days, weeks at times. So you're right, it sterilises the ground in the first place. So any of the seeds that were in the soil in those windrows are going to be killed. So to get pastures back into there, the seed has to come in from the sides. So you're relying on wind-blown seeds to come back in and regenerate in those burnt areas. They are nutrient-rich areas, so once you get grasses in there, they do really well.
Yep.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does, yep. So it's just going to be slower. So if you're going to seed something, you should throw it in that, like in that burnt ash sort of thing?
Absolutely, yep.
Well, firstly, I'd like to thank Col for presenting today. Did a very good job for your first webinar, and also to everyone for the questions. It's made it very interactive, and hopefully everyone's got out of it what they wanted. Once again, thanks Col for presenting today, and for everyone joining the webinar. Thank you.